feel like I need to be saying bonjour when I see you guys that I'm wearing this outfit because I feel like I'm in Paris for some reason. I guess it's the flowered scarf and the striped shirt. All I need now is a beret and a baguette. Okay, so we are doing part 4 of Debbie Pearl's magnus opus, her book called Create a Better Brain Through Neuroplasticity. And it is a hot mess. That's all I can say about that. It's a hot mess. And you're about to find out how. She is straying into my territory with this next chapter. Um, if you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Titcomb. I used to write a blog called No Longer Quivering for Pathos. I used to make us call ourselves daily columnists or other things. But really, it was just daily writing. So whether you want to call it a blog, a column, an article, whatever. And one of the things I got to do was look at some crazy books. Now, don't bully anybody I'm going to be talking about. Don't even go over there and be rude to Debbie because it would serve no purpose. And I am not about that. These are my opinions after reading her book and having spent a number of years in Quiverful and the type of religion, the type of non-denominational, high-demand religious organization that Debbie herself is part of. And Debbie has written some hot mess of books. I may have to do another lengthy review of one she wrote that was fictional. And the first time I started reading through reviews of it and stuff, I didn't know it was fictional. It's about a Debbie Pearl-like person and her granddaughters getting ready for the super volcano that is Yellowstone. So it's full of all kinds of weird stuff. Muslim terrorists taking on rural Tennessee and all kinds of things. So that may be an option after this. Or I may do one of my deep dives on one of Doug Wilson's books, but I'm not sure that I have enough brain cells left to ruin to tolerate that. So we left off in part 3, which was a couple of weeks ago, because I got discombobulated once Jill Dillard's book came out, which I have to finish that one too. We left off, she was blaming gut health and what you eat and how you eat and your emotions and everything else for brain damage and various sundry brain dysfunctions. So she left off talking about the wife of this guy that lived on junk food. And the woman's name was Sally Ann. Her husband George was eating nothing but junk food, that is almost entirely junk, and processed foods, which I can tell you from having chronic ailments, that's probably the worst thing you can do is to eat processed foods, at least for me, not for everybody else. My husband lives on processed foods practically. He's 72 years old, great health. He never has to take metformin, like me, metformin. He's not on blood pressure drugs. He's not on cholesterol lowering drugs. He's just on something for his prostate. By Debbie's thinking and the thinking of others, he should be at death's door by now. He should be doing all that. Me, hey, I am trying to eat right and do all the stuff I got to do. And guess what? I'm on all those drugs. And I'm certainly not eating that way. But I have this thing that Debbie started to talk about. George, a junk food junkie's wife, was named Sue. And she eats the right things but suffers from an autoimmune disorder. She thinks George is lazy. He likely is. But she doesn't yell at him or tell him that he's a big old lazy slab of bacon and she cheesed off at him. She worries. She's a worrywart. Some of us are. And she worries about paying bills, about him losing his job because he's missing so much work because of junk food related illnesses. Junk food related illnesses for the win. Oh my goodness. So Debbie says this, which I think is just disgusting. Sadly, Sally Ann's attitude is slowly but surely destroying her most important little microbial helpers. Sorry. Her constant bitterness is producing chemicals in her stomach and her brain that are responsible for the destruction. The reason her immune system is breaking down. Again, that's not how immune systems work. That's not how immuno illnesses happen. Hell, I got one. I've got mastocytosis, or a mast cell disorder. This is not what worrying does to your body either. Worrying can stress you out and increase cortisol, and it can give you high blood pressure and stuff. But not all the crap she's claiming. She's blaming, it's a handy-dandy way for her to blame Sue for all of Sue's problems. Now, we know stress can show up in your body in some really weird ways, like blood pressure and aches and pains. But saying it literally kills off gut microbes is a huge stretch, and there's zero scientific evidence of that. Debbie just wants to throw BS at everybody. She wants to throw crap. Another interesting Debbie quote from this little bit. Bitterness is more damaging to microbes than bad food. Bitterness is like a microbe pesticide. No. I cannot emphasize enough what poisonous, completely, utterly stupid, and empty-headed ninny-muggins, harmful thinking this is. Bitterness is the evangelical. It is the evangelical boogeyman. It's the boogeyman. It's the thing that they come up with every single time they want to throw crap, and they want to blame you for your own illnesses. I have mastocytosis because apparently there are a pile of people my father's side of the family that had it. My father used to worry about me when I was a kid a lot because I had such severe asthma. And he used to tell me he had a pile of great aunts and various family members that had severe asthma that never lived past 35. Now, my aunt and I both have this, and we've both long surpassed that. And I think that's because of better medication, better treatments. I'm sure that's what that is. Not eating the right things or not eating the right things or harmful thinking. It's not any of that. Bitterness is the boogeyman under the bed in Evangelical Town. It just is. It frightens everybody. His bloated corpse gets drug out every single time an evangelical runs up against something they do not understand. They label it bitterness, that magical blaming word. You remember yesterday I said you don't blame and shame people for things, particularly things that can't really help? Blaming someone for bitterness is the stupidest thing. There's no endocrine hormone that targets gut cells specifically to kill off if you think the wrong thing. It just doesn't work like that. Or if you're not happy enough. None of that is even remotely real if you Google it. And I highly encourage you to Google these things I'm talking about. Do your own research and come to your own conclusions when you're not bullying folks over this shit and saying things. You can produce cortisol, sure, when you're stressed out, but like we said in the earlier chapter, that's not necessarily bad. Cortisol is a whole other boogeyman in Evangelical Town that's very poorly understood, and it's even very poorly understood scientifically for weight loss. It's not a magic pill. It's not a poison pill. Another Debi quote. Even though science is just now discovering how the body and brain are best served by righteousness, and that stinking thinking is destructive, God made that announcement long ago. I don't have enough middle fingers for that one. We've already covered NLQ and no longer quivering many, many times how harmful it is to your soul, your mind, your emotions, every part of your being when you have to do mental repression, emotional repression. The toxic happiness pretense, it takes victims, sometimes in tragic ways. When you take on the idea that you're to blame for things like that are not your fault at all. Many things. Like Nancy Reagan used to say to drugs, just say no. Just say no to Debbie's ideas of fake happiness. Reading through Jill Duggar Dillard's book, Counting the Cost, you can see the harm that toxic positivity does. She talks about that in her book, how she was pushed to have no emotions and what it did, or to have only happy emotions. Then Debbie moves back to fat shaming. She loves to do that too. Did you think we were done with fat shaming? No, no, no. Surprise! Now we have George and Sue's 13-year-old son, Jerry, who is a video game enthusiast extraordinaire, like most of us have had kids that were. The son of George and Sue loves his sweet stuff, and he's frequently depressed. See what Debbie did there? She linked sweets to depression without any scientific proof. While it's never a good idea to live on a pile of cookies taller than Mount Everest, let's be real here. No one ever developed raging depression from eating a little Debbie snack cake or two. A sugar high, perhaps, but that's not depression. That's not long-term depression. Then Debbie goes on to mention he's had 2 rounds of antibiotics in 1 year. And like that, we're back to illness shaming. Oh, Debbie, it's a good thing you weren't around me the year and a half I had MRSA and had to live on antibiotics. Because that was no fun, but it wasn't what she's trying to claim it is either. Here's a Debbie quote. Jerry's health is being compromised with every dose. No. If you have a genuine infection, you have a genuine need for antibiotics, long-term antibiotics even. There are some people that have to stay on antibiotics for years. You know what compromises your health even worse than antibiotics and sugar addiction? An out-of-control bacterial infection. She goes on to claim that Sue got him the antibiotics for a simple cold from the doctor. Newsflash, Debbie, doctors in the past may have done this, but this is very forbidden now because of the overuse of antibiotics in the past, causing more antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Doctors are very particular about handing out antibiotics now. Here in Costa Rica, they've now made them where you have to have a prescription for them, which is probably right. I don't have to have a prescription for my Lyrica. I can get it over the counter, but if I wanted a dose of Bactrim, I would have to go in, and that's fine. That's the way it should be. There are also medical conditions, like I was talking about earlier, that a long course of antibiotics are truly the best course, like MRSA. I have a cousin who had a long time prostate infection that had to be on for a year's worth of antibiotics. My husband was on for like a month. It happens. And this all leads me to question, how long has it been since Debbie went to a real licensed, legitimate, straight up doctor and had a physical? I'm thinking years and years and years. Then Debbie goes on to relink poor Jerry's depression to his ill health. Nope, that's not the answer either. It can be one component of depression, that's for sure, but it is not the only thing. What do I mean by that? I have a chronic illness, you know that. I have mastocytosis. And when I first got diagnosed and I was being run through the ringer on the drugs, I had bad days. I had days where I was like, woe is effing me. Now I am flip the bird at Mr. Illness and run on and do what I want. You learn. As you deal with these things, you learn how to deal with them, and you get out of that, oh, poor, woe is me. You don't. stay in that space. If you do, then you can really make yourself pretty sick. You can worsen what's going on, I should say. You can't make yourself sick. But learning to accept what you got, or like my great grandmother used to say in French about cutting your suit to your cloth, it's true. Debbie quote, "It is a well established fact that the root of many mental and physical maladies, ranging from ADHD to skin rashes, is a poorly functioning gut." Up yours, Debbie. Up yours over my asthmatic dermatitis. That is not a poorly functioning gut. That is being allergic to everything under the sun and having my body break out in a rash as a result. Of course, Debbie makes all these claims and she can't cite one peer-reviewed study or medical peer review that supports her assumptions that healthy guts prevent or cause all of this. There's little bits here and there that say it may cause parts of this, but all of this at this depth she's talking about, this simplistic black and white view, is just not even remotely true. She follows all this with some ramblings about gardens and how your guts are like a garden. Well, they are like a garden, in the fact that they're sometimes filled with excreta. Nowhere does she state the most obvious good thing you can do for your gut, a good supplement with probiotics. She talks about worms and poop, but she can't use any of the other good words for excreta, only the toddler word of poop in her book, which made me laugh. Then she moved on to more mental health shaming. Debbie quote, "Poor nutrition is a significant contributor to mental illness. The rates of mental illness are on the rise as the quality of food we eat declines." Oh, again, literally not the main causation of mental illness. Sure, bad nutrition can play a role in making things worse, but it's not the only factor driving it. This is like blaming a faulty windshield wiper blade when the whole darn bus plunges off the cliff into the crevasse below. And here's what I find the most amusing about Debbie's nutrition drivel. Debbie is a lady of a certain age. She's older than me by some bit. And she was raised in the Deep South. The Deep South is a place that's known for stuff like Paula Deen's butter mayonnaise. There is absolutely no way that Debbie, raised in the Deep South of the 1950s and the 1960s, ate like what she's claiming. Nutrition wasn't even taught in schools there at that time. I know because I went to school in the 60s and 70s, and they weren't even scratching the surface with it then. This is all crap I had to pick up on my own later when I started having health issues. Debbie would have been likely to have been raised on a steady diet of fried foods, fried okra, fried squash, all sorts of bad stuff. Even the healthiest of foods would have been suspect, like collard greens or fresh green beans, swimming in that big old lardy base of fats. Oh, lard is the tastiest thing. Here they fry the pies at McDonald's and Burger King in lard like they used to do in the States back in the days. And I got to tell you, that's the best tasting stuff I've ever put in my mouth since I've been here. And I don't eat them very often, but if I'm rolling through a big city with a McDonald's or a Burger King, I always get a fried pie. And fried chicken, my lands, she would have eaten mountains of that crap. Bologna sandwiches, biscuits, pies, cakes, and cookies. Salads that would have come drenched in mayonnaise or sugary jello, festooned with maraschino cherries. There are parts of Mississippi and Louisiana where an RC Cola and a moon pie would have been considered a normal breakfast. So I know that Debbie had to have taken part of this crap, just knowing her age and knowing where she grew up. Why do you think that Cracker Barrel is so popular, along with places like Red Hot and Blue? I love Red Hot and Blue. We go in there, I look at the sign on the way in, it says the old south of your imagination. And there's some truth to that. The way that folks used to eat way back when you spend your days farming and doing hard physical labor. They needed the fats and the carbs to keep working. We do not need those same nutrients because we're usually sitting in front of a computer working. Many people are. Very few people are out there doing the huge physical work that was common back in the day. Let's not kid ourselves. This is how Debbie was raised. This is how I was raised. And so many other people in the Deep South were raised this way. Eventually, the information on nutrition came down to the South, and some of this changed, thankfully enough. Debbie was not raised eating a boiled egg and an avocado for breakfast for her health. Heck, Debbie has mentioned more than once that the lack of foods, much less healthy foods, in the Pearl household. Even she was telling that tale that they only had dried corn for an entire winter. That it was feed corn, the kind of corn you give to animals to feed their children in dented cat food cans. She was taking her little coffee grinder and grinding up that seed corn and making cornbread, corn mush, flapjacks, you name it with that. And that doesn't really follow anything she's talking about here either. She wasn't raised doing that. She didn't even raise her own kids following this. It wouldn't stand a reason that if Debbie followed her own advice, she, Michael, and the kids would be screwed up beyond all help now. Their years of bad nutrition would have already have doomed them all. Okay, here we have another long Debbie quote. Stress causes particular irritations inside the gut that can damage the tract to the point where it weakens and allows undigested food or waste to leak into your body cavity. When this happens, the immune system goes into overdrive, resulting in food allergies and a host of other symptoms such as joint pain, fatigue, depression, odd emotional disorders. I love how she threw odd in there. Chest pain, muscle soreness, cognitive dysfunction, a foggy brain, asthma, and skin problems like eczema, which most people do not associate with digestive issues. You know, it almost sounds like Debbie is describing fibromyalgia there. But a few little quibbles for me. Dear Debbie. Asthma is not driven by the gut. I cannot emphasize this enough. Nor food allergies. I was born with both of those things before I had my first bottle of soybean formula. Who ate the junk food in that situation? Nobody, unless you consider amniotic fluid junk food. What Debbie is trying so awkwardly to talk about here is something called leaky gut syndrome, which is one of the newer theories as to why some people get so sick without having any ailment that will show up in a test. Research is still evolving on what this is and how to treat it. You know, they're coming up with more and more immune system disorders they're recognizing every year. And like what I have, mast cell disorder, mastocytosis, they're finding out that that's what long COVID is. And like I said, the only good news of that is they're going to start working on better drugs for us. So I have family and friends who have had fibromyalgia. I know a ton of people with it. I know a ton of people with rare ailments that they're still researching and figuring out ways to treat. It is what it is, and it's not what she's claiming. Debbie quote, by taking slow, deep breaths, you can boost oxygen to your brain, This will help you overcome fear and anxiety. Brain cells are particularly sensitive to oxygen. And I'm digging around in my medical box here because I got to show you something. Debbie, buzz off or disappear or something. You know what cells in your body are sensitive to oxygen? All of them. I monitor my blood oxygen levels daily, many times a day actually. And let me tell you, there is a huge difference between, I haven't done it today, so I'm putting my finger in here. There's a huge difference between 98% saturation and 92%. And it's way more than brain fog when you start getting that low. Okay, I'm actually pretty high today. I am at a 97, which is about as high as I ever get. Yay. I start having pains in the long muscles of my body whenever my numbers drop to 90 or below. I feel a huge wave of fatigue hit and a host of other problems. And actually, I get the fatigue around 94, 93%. So that even comes first. I can't think, I can't walk well, I can't do anything. Just trudge over to the sofa or the bed for a little lay down when it's bad after I've medicated. Your blood pressure will spike, your heart will beat faster, and then your blood pressure will get low. And everything will get exponentially harder to do as your body tries desperately to boost more oxygen into your oxygen-starved cells all over your body. It's a horrible feeling I wouldn't wish on anybody. Debbie invokes the newest relaxation buzzword, mindfulness, without giving any sort of real hard definition on what that is. Instead, she launches out into a tale about her teens, about a nervous friend losing weight that ended up moving in with Debbie and her family. The story is revealing for things I'm sure Debbie did not mean to be the focus of the story at all. A few quotes. If we had extra people drop by for dinner, which happened often at our house, she would just open a can or two of pork and beans and pour them unheated into a pretty serving bowl. She had convinced my little brother, who ate the bulk of our food, that pork and beans were the best thing on the planet. The little guzzler would eat the beans, so now there was food left for our visitor. Spare me. Now, I crave pork and beans every now and then because I was raised in the deep south in that time frame. They're rare here. I don't get them. And they're not particularly great for your health because they're full of sugar and salt. But notice here, it's not exactly a meal of organic greens or boiled eggs and avocados going on. It does sound rural. It does sound southern. Growing boys will all eat huge servings of food. They need it in order to grow. A boy must take in many more calories than an adult or a girl in order to grow. A boy eating up all the food in a household with food insecurity, not enough to go around except by adding a very inexpensive food to the mix, is not a healthy situation for anybody to be living in. I got to pull this up. And then we find out why it is that Debbie is willing to accept the hideous flaws of her husband. I got to pull this up because I don't have it printed out. And it is a corker. You have to hear this before I, okay, where are we? Brain health, brain health, brain health, brain health. Why is it that all the saved recipes in my files here are all the most unhealthy foods on the planet? I don't make them very often, or if at all, but a lot of this is just bad stuff. Okay, where are you? I just need to start naming things in my folders by what they are instead of throwing on just like a last second pile of ridiculousness. Here we go. Neuroplasticity review. Okay, so I actually named that one something that it actually is. Let me see if I can pull this around so I can have the camera and this. I'm not as talented as most of these YouTubers that know how to do this crap. It's not me. I am just pretty ridiculous about this. So let us go down. Let's go down. Da, 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 da. Okay, so we get to see exactly why Debi accepted the not so nice stuff about her husband. Because Debi then went on to explain how her mom always laughed at her dad shouting and hollering, and the bean situation, the house was so merry and jolly. So much so that her friend finally started getting into eating competitions with her pesky little brother over who could eat the most meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Depression and anxiety fled for her friend, and she started gaining some weight, mostly likely from the cheap carbs that Debi's mother served instead of any Zen atmosphere animating from Debi's verbally abused mother. Okay, and next week we'll be talking about a type of eating involving eating pickled fermented foods and salty cabbage water like chili and epperly of jelly juice promoted for brain health. And I just cannot. This book is just such a hot mess of stupid ideas that every time I start looking at my review notes, it's like, I can feel the brain cells dying right now. Thank you for watching. Come back next week for part 5, where we're going to go over salty cabbage water and how that can affect your gut. And I love fermented foods, but guess what? You got to eat those in very limited quantities too, because they can drive your blood pressure through the ceiling with the excessive salt. I guess the health information never really gets down to the people that need it the most. Love you guys.